Manor.
Did you know there's a way to get Manor's latest updates without searching for it? Now you can by subscribing to Manor Newsletter. With Manor Newsletter, you'll find out the latest developments on things such as feature release dates, the status of productions, exclusive discounts for subscribers, and much, much more. Be the first to know. A subscription is free and takes less than a minute to sign up. Visit manorhq.com and fill out the subscription form on the homepage. Don't get left alone in the dark. Sign up today for Manor Newsletter by visiting manorhq.com.
Follow Manor online and on social media. You can find Manor on Twitter at Official Manor, on Instagram at Manor Entertainment, on YouTube at Manor Entertainment, and on the official website address, manorhq.com. As always, share with others and spread the word.
Warning. The following program may contain violence, explicit language, sexual situations, and dark content, unsuitable for some listeners. It is intended for mature audiences only. Discretion is advised.
It was about a year ago when my daughter and I moved out of Charleston and into Goose Creek, partly to get away from big city life, and partly to put the business about her mother behind us. Between the crime, busy streets, and bad memories, I felt we should trade the concrete and streetlights for tall grass and trees adorned with Spanish moss. My boss, understanding the tragedy our family had suffered, allowed me to telecommute as long as I didn't stray too far from the home office. I found a house that backed up against a Goose Creek reservoir, far enough away from the naval base to grant us the tranquility we were looking for. It was a gorgeous 2-story house, made to look like one of those old plantation houses, though admittedly a little more modest in size. But the 3 bedrooms were more than enough for Chelsea and me. I got the master bedroom and converted the smallest into my office. Chelsea, well, she just loved her room. It was twice as big as her old room, with hardwood floors and a window looking out over the reservoir. We spent a whole day in old clothes painting her room pink. I'm not even sure if we got more paint on ourselves or the walls, for all the horsing around we did. It didn't matter. It seemed like the first time either of us had really laughed in a long while. I can still hear her giggles echoing through the house. There, surrounded by the steamy summer humidity and the muzzy paint fumes, we were happy, the 2 of us. Goose Creek seemed like the new beginning we both needed after her mother passed on. Well, the summer came and went, as summers do in the South, hot and muggy. When a breeze came off the reservoir, it would be something of a relief. But summer in South Carolina was summer in South Carolina. Lots of shade, iced tea, and showers just to keep the film of perspiration at bay. School came, riding on the winds of autumn. Chelsea was nervous, of course, and even started to cry a little on the first day of school, despite being almost 10. After losing one parent, I knew she didn't want to let go of me. But it only took her a week or so before she was coming home every day with a big, bright smile on her face. A smaller school meant fewer bullies, and, it seemed, more kids eager to make a new friend. Before we knew it, we had slipped straight through a mild winter and were staring down another summer. A whole year had passed, and we had carved out a simple, pleasant life for ourselves. I was excited to have my little girl around the house during the day. But there was one huge obstacle: work. When most people hear telecommuting, they think of waking up when you want to, doing your work at your own pace, and only putting on proper clothes if you feel like it. The reality of telecommuting was not so grand. Working from home still meant full work days, client calls at all hours of the day, and being checked on regularly by the boss via webcam. This, however, was another benefit to Goose Creek. I felt comfortable letting Chelsea go out and explore, ride her bike, or walk to a friend's house. I made a point of making sure she stopped back at the house for lunch every day. We also had a long discussion about how far she was allowed to roam, and that she wasn't to play near the reservoir while I was working. Chelsea didn't fuss one bit. She had never experienced so much freedom in her life. One day in late June, my little girl walked in the house at 11:30. Her pink t-shirt and shorts were cleaner than normal, and her auburn ponytail wasn't half as frazzled as it was on most summer days. She met me in the kitchen with a quizzical look on her face. She climbed onto one of the stools by a big window facing the street and asked, "Daddy, what are they doing at the end of the street?" I turned to look out the window and frowned. "I don't know, Shellbear. What does it look like they're doing?" Chelsea shrugged as she pulled her plate close. I had made tuna sandwiches and iced tea, and she had taken a big bite and was still chewing when she said, "Don't know. Look like digging or something." "Manners," I said. She swallowed her bite and repeated herself more clearly. "Looks like they are digging, but I don't know why." It was my turn to shrug. "Probably just road work or something," I said, before biting into my own sandwich. "Can I explore it after lunch?" she asked. "Well, I don't know if that's a good idea, Shellbear. Could be dangerous." "I'll be careful, Daddy. Promise." She had put on her big-eyed expression, the one that is supposed to melt a father in place, and one that I had fought hard against, which to build up resistance. At the same time, I remembered when I was her age, and how I probably wouldn't even have bothered asking my parents. When I thought back to the trouble I would get into, I wondered how it was I ever made it to adulthood. Finally, I relented, but only a little. "You can ask the workers, if there are any that aren't too busy. But that's it, understand? You aren't to cross any boundaries or touch anything. We got a deal?" Chelsea looked at me like she was going to try to haggle with me on the terms. She did that sometimes. She thought better of it, and with her big, bright smile, nodded and said, "Deal!" We finished our sandwiches and tea. Chelsea hurriedly washed up before dashing out of the house, the screen door banging loudly in her wake. I carried myself back to my office, checked in with my boss, and forgot all about the road work Chelsea was so excited about at lunch. Chelsea was eager to remind me when she brought it back up later in the evening as I threw some burgers on the grill for dinner. "There wasn't nobody there when I went to go look, Daddy." "Anybody," I corrected her. She scowled that scowl that said I knew what she meant. It was her mother's scowl. Ignoring it, I told her she could try again in the morning after breakfast, and that, combined with the burgers topped with lots of ketchup, seemed to satisfy her. I suppose I half expected her to forget about the whole thing. Maybe I didn't expect anything at all. It just wasn't something that was registering on my radar until the morning came, and Chelsea could hardly wait to rush out and see what was going on down the road. She was half out the door when I called her back to remind her to brush her teeth. After perfunctory scrubbing, she gave me a half-hearted hug and bolted. Strange, I thought, and I found myself following her footsteps out to the edge of my front lawn to get a better look at what had captivated her so. I looked down the road in the same direction Chelsea was jogging and saw nothing more than a pile of rubble on the side of the road. There were no road signs or caution tape, just a mound of black and gray rocks. It seemed harmless enough, but at the same time, I felt a sense of apprehension creep up through my gut and latch onto my spine. "You be careful, and remember what I told you, Shellbear," I hollered after her. She looked back over her shoulder and smiled at me, her hand giving me the thumbs up before returning her attention to the rubble pile. I shook my head and made my way back inside. I had a web meeting with some new clients to prepare for. When I got back to my office, I discovered that I could actually see just a sliver of rubble pile from my office window. The needs in my meeting drew my attention away, but when I logged off of the group video chat, I grabbed a cup of coffee and found myself staring down the road at the heap. Chelsea was nowhere to be seen, probably off to go visit one of her friends. No doubt the allure of the rocks already worn off. But it was odd. If it was road work, there should have been some orange somewhere, a sign or something. And there should have been workers, too, with day-glow vests and hard hats. But there was no one there. I was about to put together a report for my boss on the meeting when movement from the rubble stopped me. Fear swiftly shooting down my throat and forming a solid, heavy pit in my stomach. There was someone there working after all. But it was all wrong. It's a pretty long street, so I couldn't be sure exactly of what I was seeing. But Dayglow is pretty unmistakable, and this guy wasn't wearing any at all. Instead, his tall, gaunt frame was dressed in black from head to toe, long sleeves and all. That bit I found odd. Who would dress like that in this heat? Odder still was his hat. He looked like he was wearing one of those old stove pipe hats. I didn't even know they made those anymore, outside maybe costume shops and elementary school classrooms. But there he was, in all black, with a stovepipe hat and a shovel slung over his shoulder. The curious figure vanished behind the pile. It was such a strange image, I was tempted to think it was just my overactive imagination. Real or not, all thoughts of the unsettling figure were pushed out of my mind by the chime from my computer, informing me that my boss needed to chat with me. The noise startled me so much that I spilled coffee all over a stack of my reports, ultimately pushing the image of the dark stranger out of my mind so I could focus on the newly burgeoning coffee crisis, along with the numbers and contractual obligations and everything else that came up in the meeting. At lunch, Chelsea informed me that, again, to her disappointment, she didn't find any men working at the site. But she did have something new to share. "Daddy, there's something strange about those rocks." What's that, Showbear? Well, I don't think they're rocks at all. Why's that? They're all smooth and shiny. I've never seen any rocks in the wild as smooth and shiny as that. I frowned. You didn't go messing about in that pile, did you, Showbear? Of course not, Daddy. I was just looking. And when no one turned up, I went on over to Teresa's. Her daddy put up a tire swing. For a moment, I contemplated telling her about the man in the black clothes and stovepipe hat, but then thought better of it. I didn't know what was going on down the street, but I figured the less curiosity I encouraged, the better. There was no more discussion of the rubble at the end of the street until that evening. It was too hot to cook, so I made a quick salad and cut up some leftover chicken for dinner. The two of us were eating on the back patio when Chelsea said, "Whatever they're doing, they're definitely digging." "Oh?" "Mm-hmm. There's a big old ditch just on the other side of the pile," Chelsea said. "Did you ever find someone to tell you what it's all about?" I asked. Chelsea shook her head, clearly frustrated. "No, but I aim to find out," she declared. I think now, if it weren't for the new client and all the extra hoops my boss was making me jump through to make the new contract work, I would have put an end to things then and there. But as it was, I had to spend the evening running numbers as Chelsea watched TV, and the rubble pile was, yet again, pushed aside. I didn't even think about it again until a few days later at lunch when Chelsea announced, "Daddy, I think those rocks are broken up tombstones." "Now, what in the world would make you say a thing like that?" I said, as my fork hovered between my plate and my mouth. My mind instantly reverted back to the tall figure in the stovepipe hat, and an uneasy prickling sensation crawled down my spine. "Well, like I said, they're all smooth and shiny, and I think I saw some writing on some of them." "I think one little girl's imagination is running away with her, is what I think," I said pointedly. Chelsea responded with her patent scowl. I was about to forbid her from looking into the pile any further, but sometimes the quickest and surest way to make sure a kid does a thing is to forbid her to do it. So I let the subject drop. We went back to our normal routine, Chelsea running out the front door, me slogging back to my office. Again, I spared the heap of rocks another look. The ditch, the man in black, Chelsea's assertion that they were crumbled up tombstones, it all just kind of balled itself up into one tiny knot of unease in my stomach. But then I stared at the mound and thought, hell, it's just some rocks. Maybe the neighbor is digging them up to lay a new driveway. There were a ton of completely rational explanations, none of which were the least bit frightening. And that was all I thought about until Chelsea came back home for supper, holding a big, gray-black hunk of something. She thrust it into my hand as I looked on, dumbfounded. With a triumphant air, she put her hands on her hips and said, "Told you so." I looked down at the hard, heavy mass in my hand. It was indeed smooth and polished on several of its sides, rough and irregular on others, and it was mottled gray and black, kind of like those fancy countertops you sometimes see in newer kitchens. And there, on one of the smooth, glossy faces, was a carved uppercase T. For one, Showbear, this doesn't prove a thing. This could have come from a statue or a plaque, or a sign or anything. Just because someone carved some letters into a rock doesn't make it a tombstone, I explained. For another, I thought I said you weren't to be messing around with that pile. I made myself very clear. You were allowed to ask whoever was working what they were doing, and that was it. I didn't yell at Chelsea often. She rarely ever needed it. But when I did yell at her, she always looked so wounded, so hurt. I'm sorry, Daddy, she said in a small voice, and well, hell. I just gave her a hug and sent her to go wash up for supper. I hoped the whole episode was over. I wanted it to be over. But when Chelsea came in for lunch the next day, any thoughts that the mystery of the rubble pile was a thing of the past were completely ruined. Daddy, that work, it has to do with dead people. I'm sure of it. Caught somewhere between inhaling my soup and spitting it back out, I ended up in a violent coughing fit that only made my temper worse. Damn it, Chelsea! I thought I made myself clear. Now this has gone on long enough. Do you understand? No more. But, no buts. You seem to have forgotten, young lady, that I am your father. Is that clear? Her eyes wobbled in a pool of fledgling tears. Normally that would have been enough to get me to calm down. But by now, I was yelling. Is that clear? She didn't answer as tears spilled down her round cheeks and her lips quivered. Chelsea opened her mouth, almost as if to speak. Then a glint of defiance shone through the tears, and in a flash, she pushed away from the table. There was a single searing moment where contempt flashed in her eyes, and then I watched as she ran out the house. I was about to chase her down when my phone rang. I considered ignoring it. But if I ignored even one call from my boss, I could lose the telecommute privileges. Hissing curses under my breath, I checked the phone and answered it. I should have gone after her. I know that now. But next thing I knew, I was chained to my computer, hunting down all the technicalities my boss needed to make this new contract work. The time for Chelsea to come home had come and gone. I was already worried when she stormed out of the house, but when the sun had started to get bloated and red and she still wasn't home, I was on the verge of panic. Outside, the shadows began to stretch and deepen, and the rock pile down the road took on a strange, dark, mysterious quality. Unsure what to do, I started looking through the list of moms in my address book. I bit back the worry in my voice as I called one after another, trying not to let the fear show, even as I asked if they had seen my daughter. Each call ended up being a different variation of the same theme. No, sorry, Chelsea hasn't been here today. Is something wrong? I was about to call the fifth mom when I heard the back door swing open and then slam shut. Oh, thank God, I breathed, not even bothering to hang the phone back on its cradle. Shellbear, honey, I'm so glad you're... The words died in my throat. My muscle was locking up as I turned the corner and stepped into the kitchen. Terror poured over me as I stared at the thing in my kitchen. It was a man, or at least it once had been a man, though how long ago was impossible to say. Where there should have been skin and eyes, there was now only bone, caked in black soil, eye sockets empty as they stared blankly back at me. His clothes were once fine, a black tuxedo, or at least a good suit, but the shirt had been torn to shreds, revealing his rib cage, mottled gray with rotten earth. Underneath, I could make out shriveled, blackened organs, turned hard and formless with time, held in place by clumps of fetid soil. One hand clutched a stovepipe hat, almost as though this thing was too polite to wear it indoors. His other hand rested on the shoulder of my baby girl, Chelsea. Her skin was ashen, her hair limp, and her eyes empty, almost as though they had been as hollow as those of the corpse beside her. That dead, empty gaze turned up to me, and in a small voice I could only just recognize as belonging to my daughter, she said, "Told you so." You've been listening to Manor House, Episode 9, Told You So. This episode was originally recorded and produced in 2015. Subscribe to this show and leave a rating, a review, and general feedback wherever you're receiving this program. Share with others on social media and at home. Your feedback, as well as sharing with others, helps grow and continue future productions. Credits. Story by K.E. Moore. Script by Rock Capuano. Performed by Rock Capuano. Music and sound design provided by Edo SFX. Manor House theme song by Alan Postscript. Theme song based on The Shining by the Angelos. Cover artwork by Chris Burke. Special thanks to Chris Burke. Manor House was created by Rock Capuano. Manor House is a Manor Entertainment production. The story, all names, characters, and incidents portrayed in this production are fictitious. No identification with actual persons, living or deceased, places, buildings, and products is intended or should be inferred. This production is property of Manor Entertainment, LLC. No portion of this production may be reproduced or used by any means without the proper written consent of Manor Entertainment, LLC. This production is protected under the copyright laws of the United States and other countries throughout the world. Country of first publication, United States of America. Any unauthorized exhibition, distribution, or copying of this production, or any part thereof, may result in civil liability and criminal prosecution. Copyright 2019, Manor Entertainment, LLC. Manor.